In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the fan blade on this Toyota Tacoma with a 2.4 liter engine. Let's install this TRQ fan blade. From underneath, you can reach over to unthread the petcock. This is just a threaded piece of plastic. Sometimes it gets stuck and you might need some pliers. As soon as this starts draining, just let it drain into the appropriate collection bucket so you can recycle the coolant properly. To allow the coolant to drain faster and let air in, undo the radiator cap. It's going to have two stages to it. Once you click it once, press it, turn it again. That will allow it to come off. Just set it aside. Let's remove the hose clamp off of the upper radiator hose, squeeze it with some pliers, and pull it off of the hose, just like that. At this point, we can remove the hose, twist it. That's going to break it free, and then you can pull it off. The crossover pipe here for this vacuum hose is bolted onto the upper radiator or the fan shroud, but you can leave it on. You can just pull the hoses off of it. There's one that goes towards the air box. This one's kind of stuck, so I'm actually just going to pull it off the air box instead, as opposed to messing with this. And then on the other end of it, this one's going to the evap canister, so just slide the hose off. Now to unbolt the fan shroud, there are 4 bolts in total, 10mm headed bolts, 1 in each corner, so they just form a square basically. I'm going to remove all of them, and then the fan shroud should slide up. Now to pull up the fan shroud, you have to wiggle it past the fan. In my case, the lower piece of it is actually missing, but if you have a lower piece, I'll show you exactly in a second how to remove that. You just unclip it, and then you'll be able to do this. So the lower piece that I'm talking about actually goes here, and it basically looks like the top, except it's separate. You just unclip it here and here, and it pops off. Once again, mine is missing, but with that unclipped, if you have it, just pry the fan shroud up. To loosen up the 4 12mm mounting nuts on the fan clutch and fan blade assembly here, I'm going to stick a pry bar right between one of the bolts, or one of the mounting nuts. That's going to hold it from spinning. Actually, I'm going to spin it clockwise just a little to get it over here. Usually the belt is not enough to hold it. And once you get a wrench on there with the pry bar in place, you should be able to crack these bolts free, or the mounting nuts. Now, you don't have to remove them all the way. You just break them all free first and then remove them the rest of the way. To spin this over, you just use your wrench and kind of push it over to where you need it to hold it. There we go. They shouldn't be extremely tight. Usually they're just a little bit stuck. Okay. The fan blade bolts loose. Now you can start removing them one at a time. There we go. Gonna have to spin this over to get to that last one, which is now on the bottom. Okay, got that last one off. Often these fan clutch assemblies are stuck, corroded. You can try to pry it a little bit, but be very careful where you pry. And usually I just like to give them a couple taps with a pry bar and a hammer. You can wiggle it like that up against the studs. Oh, there it goes. All right. Use a 10mm socket and remove the 4 mounting nuts that hold the fan blade onto the fan clutch. A lot of times you'll have to tap this out with a rubber mallet, so give it a couple taps. There we go. It corrodes right around the edges here. Separate the two. There you have it. Set the fan blade onto the fan clutch. Start on all the mounting nuts and make sure that this is fully seated down before you tighten it. Otherwise you can accidentally tighten it at an angle, and that's obviously not going to be good. Once you get these all on, snug them up. And just make sure they're all nice and snug. If you're doing this by hand, give them about 1/8 of a turn at most. They're very small. You don't want to strip them out or break them. Get the fan clutch and blade assembly back down on the water pump. Slide it over, line it up with those studs. There we go. Once you start one mounting nut, the fan will stop falling off on you, and then you can more easily start the other ones. Okay, got the second one in. At this point, if you want to, you can try to spin this water pump so you can get the other bolts in an easier position, easier location. If you have a wrench ready, you can also try to start tightening these a little. That'll pull the fan clutch pulley a little bit closer and get you a little bit more threads exposed on those studs. All right, they're all started. I'm going to do my best snugging them up with the wrench here. There's no way I can torque these just because of their location, so I'm going to use my ratcheting wrench, get them bottomed out, and then I'll grab a longer wrench to get some better leverage and just snug them up the best I can. Now the belt will start slipping eventually, so that's when you're going to have to hold this with a pry bar, just like we did when we removed it. As you can see, it's already slipping, but that's all right. I'm just snugging them up. But you want to make sure that this is tight. You definitely do not want this coming loose while the engine is running. Torque for these is 16 foot-pounds. Not that I'll be able to torque it really, but I'm just going to make it as tight as I can. As soon as the fan starts spinning, or the water pump, I'm going to leave it at that. 16 foot-pounds is not a lot. I don't want to over-tighten these, but I want to make sure that they're tight enough. That's what I'm going for here. All right, they're all just as tight. The fan is spinning, or the water pump is spinning. Can't make them any tighter, and I don't really want to. I don't want to stick a pry bar in there at this point. I made them plenty tight, so this is good to go. On the fan shroud here, we have a bolt in each corner. You can see them here and here. This is how it's going to get secured, basically. I'm showing you this now because it's a little bit difficult to see once it's in. Also for us, if you remember, this lower piece was missing, so if you had yours, after you slide it back down, you would just clip this back on. Slide the fan shroud down. Careful of your radiator fins. It should fall right into place here. If you line it up with the little threads here on the radiator. If you have a couple bolts ready, I'm going to get to this one first. It's the easiest one to reach. And just start in the bolt. That'll allow it to stay on. I'll do this other top one, and then the two bottoms. Tighten up these bolts. They're holding onto this plastic shroud, so when you snug them, as soon as they get tight, just stop right there. So right about here, it's putting a little bit of pressure on it. I don't want to completely crush this and break it. Do the same to the rest of them. Reconnect this hose, whether you disconnected it from the air box or from the piece of from the crossover pipe here. And on the other side. If either of those are in poor condition, replace them. Reconnect the upper radiator hose. Push it in all the way. Grab the clamp. And slide it right over exactly where it was. Make sure that's seated. It's time to fill the cooling system, and I'm going to do that by installing a spill-proof funnel. This also allows it to burp up the air a little bit faster because now this is going to be the highest point in the cooling system as opposed to one of the hoses or the heater core. So the air will naturally want to rise up here. If you don't have this, you could just fill it through the radiator. Just might take a little bit longer to get all the air out. At this point, you want to use manufacturer specified coolant or something equivalent. Fill this up and let it burp out all the air naturally. Once it stops bubbling out, we're going to turn on the engine and do a full bleed on the cooling system. At this point, it stopped bubbling, so you'd want to turn on the engine, let it run with this funnel on here if you have one. If not, just keep an eye on it and make sure the coolant stays topped off on the radiator here. And you want to let the engine warm up, reach operating temperature by just idling. Once it reaches operating temperature, the thermostat will open up, let coolant circulate through everything. The water pump will continue pumping and push all of the air bubbles out. Once it's running at operating temperature and you stop seeing air bubbles here, shut it off. You also want to have the heat on high, so turn up the heat, not the blower on low, but have the heat on high so it can circulate through the heater core. With it shut off, cap it off. A little trick is to squeeze on the upper radiator hose just a little bit, plug the hole, and now as you pull it, let go of the radiator hose. That avoids spilling everything that's in here. It'll kind of suck it back down. And I'm going to put the rest in my overflow tank, which looks like for me it's pretty full, so I'm just going to top it off. You'll see the line on the side of it. Right there. That should be full. Not going to fill it too much, otherwise that would be bad. Cap this off and remove your funnel adapter if you had one. Reinstall the radiator cap. Click it once and again. There you have it.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.